Welcome to another episode of Tales from the Hangman's Record. My name is Steve Fielding. All the stories are taken from my 3-volume series of books, The Hangman's Record, covering every execution in Great Britain and Ireland between 1868 and 1964. Copies of these and many of my other titles can be obtained through my website, stevefielding.com. If you enjoy the video, can you please press like and subscribe to the channel, and if you can spare £1 or £2 to help it to continue to grow by clicking the thanks button on the YouTube video or the link paypal.me/thehangmansrecord, that will be greatly appreciated. And, as always, use the comments below for your thoughts on the case, whether justice was seen to be done, and suggestions for future episodes in this series. Today's tale from the Hangman's Record takes us back 70 years to 1955. In Great Britain, Queen Elizabeth II is in the 3rd year of her reign, with Conservative Winston Churchill as Prime Minister. Churchill retires in April following a bout of ill health and is replaced by Anthony Eden. In America, Republican President Dwight D. Eisenhower is serving the first of his 2 terms in the White House. In world events, West Germany becomes a sovereign state and a member of NATO, Eoka begins resistance to British rule in the Crown Colony of Cyprus, President Juan Perón is ousted in Argentina, and the war in Vietnam begins. In France, 83 people are killed at the Le Mans motor race when 2 cars collide at great speed, with one catapulting into the crowd and exploding into flames. The year also saw the deaths of physicist Albert Einstein, physician Alexander Fleming, the discoverer of penicillin, and actor James Dean, killed in a road accident before his final film, Rebel Without a Cause. 1955 also saw the release of the film Blackboard Jungle, featuring the song Rock Around the Clock, which will see Teddy Boys both dancing in the aisles and rioting in the theatres. It was a year that also saw Elvis Presley make his first TV appearance, the first McDonald's restaurant franchise, the opening of Disneyland in California, and in England, the launch of ITV, ending the BBC's television monopoly. In Great Britain, it was also a pivotal year in crime, which saw the last hanging of a woman and the last men hanged for child murder. There was also no executions after 1955 while Parliament debated what was to become the Homicide Act, which was passed in 1957. And in the northwest of England, a serial child killer becomes the last entry in the diary of the country's most famous executioner. It was the early evening of Friday, the 27th of August 1954, as 2 7-year-old boys, Billy Mitchell and Alan Jones, were playing out in the late summer sunshine in the shadow of the Haunted Mill, a derelict building on the banks of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal at Wigan, Lancashire, in the northwest of England. Suddenly, a man rushed up to Billy and stabbed him once in the chest. The young lad's cries attracted the attention of 2 men, who hurried over and, seeing what had happened, that the child wasn't seriously injured, told him, "It's all right, son, we'll get him," and set off in pursuit of the fleeing attacker. As his young friend ran to fetch help, Billy made his way back to his home on nearby Cross Street, telling his mother what had happened. The police were immediately called, and asked to describe the attacker. Billy said that he had seen the man before walking along Chapel Street, that he was fur-haired, wearing a blue suit, and as tall as Daddy, about 5'10". Alan Jones also told the police that he would be able to recognise the man again. He said, "I first saw him come out of the Haunted Mill. This man at first followed a woman, then turned towards us. I was sat on a wall where he attacked Billy." Fortunately, the young lad was found to only have a minor wound, the cut being little more than a deep scratch, needing just a dressing and no stitches. Neither the attacker nor the 2 men who chased after him could be found. Then, barely half an hour later, police in Wigan were notified of another attack on a young boy. 70-year-old Joseph Molesley told them that a young boy had been stabbed and was lying badly injured. He had been approached by Joseph Kelly, who had been crossing some spur ground known as the Sands and Myery Lane, looking for his daughter, when he heard a voice crying for help. "What happened?" Kelly asked. "It's a man," the boy replied weakly. They were then joined by Mosley's son-in-law, Edward Woods, and a neighbour who recognised the young boy as 11-year-old William Harmer. As Kelly left the scene, Woods picked up the young boy, who had now collapsed into unconsciousness, and took him to his home at 1 Vere Street, just 400 yards away. The boy's mother, Margaret Harmer, heavily pregnant with her 6th child, was in a state of near collapse when she saw the state of her son. He had been clearly stabbed repeatedly, and his clothing was soaked from heavy bleeding. A police patrol car was soon at the scene, and the constable found the young boy lying on the sofa, clearly in a bad way. He began to administer first aid, but then waited for the ambulance. Samuel Harmer, the boy's father, who was racing his greyhound at Woodhouse Lane Stadium, was sent for and arrived just as the ambulance had taken his son to hospital. William Harmer died from his injuries, and the post-mortem, carried out by Home Office pathologist Dr. George Manning, revealed that there was 11 stab wounds to the boy's body. The murder weapon was thought to be a penknife. Over 100 policemen, some with metal detectors, scoured the wasteland for the murder weapon, and others, using large magnets, searched the canal. Detectives making door-to-door inquiries spoke to May Penman, who lived nearby at 75 Myrie Lane. She told us seeing a man standing on the steps of the Crown Inn, wearing a light blue suit, aged about 25 and with light hair. This description clearly matched that given by the young lads in the earlier attack, almost certainly proving that they were the work of the same person. Paul Foster, the Chief Constable of Wigan, wasted no time in calling for the assistance of Scotland Yard, and Superintendent Colin McDougall and Sergeant Harry Greaves hurried north. McDougall liaised with Detective Chief Superintendent Cecil Lindsay, head of Lancashire CID, who had led the investigation into another recent child stabbing in the area. 2 months earlier, 6-year-old Wilfred Schofield of Ire Hence had been found dead with 5 stab wounds on spur ground 500 yards from his home. No one had been charged with the crime, although a 9-year-old boy had admitted that he had been holding a knife as a group of lads had been playing when the young boy received the fatal wounds. He later retracted his statement, saying that he was elsewhere at the time. There had been mention of a tall blonde man, but with no further evidence, the coroner recorded a verdict of misadventure. The police also need to rule out the 2 men who had chased after Billy Mitchell's attacker, and the man who had told Joseph Mosley about finding the stricken William Harmer. Joseph Kelly, known as Stiffy, was quickly traced and interviewed. He told how he had found William Harmer and had then passed on the information to Mosley before continuing to search for his daughter, who had stayed out longer than she should have. She had been found safe and well, and he had returned home with her. The 2 men who had chased Billy's attacker were also located and were quickly able to satisfy detectives that they had nothing to do with the crimes. In the meantime, the dead boy's father told reporters that he was conducting his own one-man investigation. "The police have all the facilities for investigation," he said, "but I'm doing the best I can to find my boy's killer. I think he lives somewhere in this area." Detectives, armed with dozens of photographs of blonde men, visited many pubs and social clubs, searching for witnesses and asking if anyone had been in the area at the time of the attacks. Police forces throughout the northwest cooperated in the hunt for the bloodstained clothing, with detectives considering the possibility that with the absence of blood at the scene of crime, William Harmer had been attacked elsewhere. As William Harmer was buried at Gidlow Cemetery, disused premises near the murder scene, including the Haunton Mill, were thoroughly searched without bringing any leads. There was also suggestion that the case could be linked to an unsolved murder that took place in the area during the war. A journalist who was shown around a photograph of barmaid Eunice Clements, murdered 12 years ago at Newton, near Wigan, was told they didn't find that murderer and they won't find this boy's. Weeks turned into months, and although detectives continued in their search for the murderer of Billy Harmer, and with strong witness evidence of the killer if he could be found, the trail eventually grew cold. The Scotland Yard detectives returned to London, and the investigation was slowly wound down. It was Easter Monday, the 11th of April 1955, and in houses throughout the country, people listened to their radios, enthralled as American lawyer Perry Mason successfully defended another client. In the Lower Inns district of Wigan, James Jones and his friend Walter Wiggins were both enjoying the programme when a piercing scream interrupted their listening. Darting from his chair, Jones feared that the scream had come from his daughter Doris's bedroom. He dashed upstairs and seeing that Doris was asleep, he went outside. Opening his front door onto Cross Street, Jones saw that other neighbours had been alerted by the sound, and lifting the light from Wiggins' bicycle, Jones shouted to his friend, "Walter, come quickly," and together they rushed down the street. As they approached a piece of waste ground about 20 yards away, Jones's first thought was that a girl that had been assaulted, so high-pitched were the screams. But reaching a patch of land, he saw a young boy lying whimpering on the ground in Back Hope Street. By the light of the bicycle lamp, Jones could see that the boy was bleeding heavily from the neck, and telling his friend to stay with him, he hurried to call the police from a telephone box. The call box was occupied, and Jones knocked frantically on the glass, asking the caller to hurry up. Walter Wiggins saw that the boy was barely alive and needed urgent attention, and rather than wait for the ambulance, he hurried to summon Dr. Murphy, who lived nearby. Murphy tried to make the young lad comfortable till the ambulance could ferry him to Wigan Infirmary, but at 10:20 he was pronounced dead on arrival. The boy was identified as 10-year-old Norman Yates, who had left his home on Haywood Street to run an errand for his mother to fetch some sugar from an aunt's house in nearby Hope Street. He had only been gone 5 minutes and must have encountered his killer almost at once. The post-mortem, again conducted by Dr. Manning, found that the boy had been fully clothed, but his trousers had been pulled down and his fly buttons torn off. A post-mortem showed that death had been caused by 4 knife wounds. 3 of the wounds to the chest, while the 4th, the fatal blow, had severed the neck close to the Adam's apple, causing a massive hemorrhage. The murder weapon was believed to be a small, pointed instrument. This investigation was handled by Chief Inspector Cecil Lindsay, and although nobody had seen Norman's killer as he had made his getaway, a number of witnesses gave police a description of the man seen in the area shortly before the murder. He was said to be aged between 20 and 30, around 5 foot 6 inches tall, slim build, long blonde hair swept back, sagging jaw possibly with no teeth, and a prominent nose, wearing a blue suit and crepe-sole shoes and a silver wristwatch. He also had a habit of rubbing his hands together as he spoke. It was clear detectives were linking the 2 murders when they issued a notice. 2 boys have already been stabbed to death in Wigan. Your help may prevent another boy being murdered. On Wednesday, Lindsay announced that he wished to speak to a man using a telephone box at the time of the murder. On the following afternoon, after hearing of an appeal for him to come forward, a postman confirmed he had been summoning a doctor for a relative who had been taken ill but was unable to offer any other help to the officers. Lindsay thought he had a likely suspect when it was learned that a patient from a Liverpool mental hospital had escaped and was believed to be heading for his home in the Wigan area. When it was learned that he matched the description of the killer, the hunt was stepped up. The man was quickly found and, after satisfying police of his innocence, was eliminated from inquiries and returned to the institution. The hunt for the killer involved all available officers in the region, with many from neighbouring towns drafted in to help. Lindsay found it puzzling that the boy could have been stabbed within sight of a row of houses and the killer getting clean away. He was also surprised at the lack of leads regarding the suspect, bearing in mind his visually striking features, which he felt sure would betray him. As with the previous murder, every witness in the area reported seeing a blonde-haired man, and each statement seemed to verify the other. The breakthrough finally came, as it often does, through routine inquiries. Suspecting that the killer may have taken blood-stained clothing in for cleaning, detectives visited a number of dry cleaning shops. They learned that Norman William Green, a 25-year-old corn grinder of 102 Holgate, Wigan, had recently taken in a blue 2-piece suit. Green was interviewed by a police constable who noted that he fitted the description of the killer and that his hair was practically white. On Friday afternoon, the 15th of April, Inspector Edmondson and Detective Sergeant Parkinson visited the offices of Charlson & Sons and asked to see Norman Green. Asked about his movements on the day of the murder, Green appeared relaxed, telling the detectives, "I went out for a paper at about 7 o'clock in the evening and then had a walk around Wigan. I then went home about 8:30. Green paused and Edmondson asked, "Did you stay in your house for the remainder of the night?" He hesitated before answering. "No, I went out again to Market Square and had a drink in the Bath Springs pub. I then walked around town and got home just after 10 o'clock. I never went to inns that night." "Where did you go after you left the Bath Springs?" he was asked. "I went along Crompton Street, past the Ritz, to the toilets in Millgate, and then stood in front of the Hippodrome and got home just after 10. Asked how he knew about the time, Green said he was wearing this and reached into his pocket, pulled out a chrome wristwatch with a leather strap. "Where do you usually wear that?" "On my left wrist," replied Green. The two detectives looked at each other and then addressed Green. "You answer the description of a man seen in the Railway Hotel, Lower Inns, around 9 o'clock, Green was told. "It wasn't me," he protested. "I've already told you I never went near Inns on Easter Monday." "Did you know that the police were anxious to interview a man of your description?" Edmondson told him. "I did not want any trouble, that's why I didn't come forward." "I'm not satisfied with your explanation," the inspector began. "Oh, I remember now," Green suddenly blurted out. "I did go to the railway, but I had nothing to do with that boy." Edmondson stopped him and told Green he was being arrested on suspicion of murder. Norman Green was taken to Lower Inns police station, where he was interviewed by Chief Inspector Lindsay. "When you were first seen this afternoon, did you deny having been in the Railway Inn on Easter Monday night?" "Yes," replied Green, "but I told the truth after." "Were you aware that the police were looking for a blonde man in the vicinity of the Railway Inn?" "Yes, but there's more blondes than me," Green protested. Asked to give a sample of his hair, Green agreed, but added, "All right, as long as you don't spoil it." Detectives had learned that because of his light hair, Green was given the nickname Snowball at work. "The chaps had been razzing me about being blonde, saying that the cops would come for me and that I'd get the rope," he told the chief. "Why didn't you come forward then?" questioned Lindsay. "Because I had nothing to do with it. I'm not the type you're looking for." "What type do you think we are looking for?" asked Lindsay. "Like Straffen," came the reply. "What do you know about Straffen?" the detective asked him. "I've read about him. He killed 2 little girls and they didn't hang him. Didn't they send him to an asylum?" In 1951, John Thomas Straffen, a 22-year-old child murderer, had escaped from Broadmoor and killed again during his short time at liberty. Sentenced to death at his second murder trial, he was later reprieved and returned to Broadmoor, where he died in 2007. On Friday afternoon, as Green was being interviewed, Norman Yates was buried at Westwood Cemetery. The cortege passed slowly through Lower Inns, the street lined with many of the young schoolmates who stood with their caps in their hand, several in tears. Numerous wreaths were piled high in the cemetery, including one from the parents of Billy Harmer, murdered the previous summer and who detectives believed was killed by the same person. As the funeral came to an end, a rumour spread that a man had been arrested for Norman's murder. At the police station, the interview with Green had continued. Still denying any involvement, he told the detective, "Do I look like one who would do that? I go to the mission a lot. I was at one with my brother in Chorley last Friday." "Do you own a knife?" the chief inspector asked. "No, I never carry a penknife," Green replied. "I asked if you had a knife. I never mentioned a penknife." "They say he was stabbed with a penknife," Green said. "I have a jackknife at work, but I never carry it." Green then admitted he got the urge to drink beer, but I fight against it. Same with cigarettes. As he was being interviewed, detectives called at his home, where they took away a blue jacket, a pair of matching trousers and a pair of brown crepe shoes. Seeing the police activity at the house, a large crowd began to gather before being told to go away by a local priest. Shown the clothing taken from his home, Green admitted that he'd been wearing them on the night of Norman Yates' murder. Green then paused, looked down for a moment and then replied, "I am very sorry. I am sorry for his mother. I hope she forgives me for what I have done." Cautioned again, Green was now taken to his workplace where the detectives took possession of the jackknife off his workbench. Green then pointed to a sack full of coin and said, "There's the knife. I think there will be blood on it." "Can you account for it?" said Lindsay. "I got an urge to do it," Green said, sobbing. "I fight against it, but it's no use." Returned to the station, Green then made a detailed statement. "Most of the things I told you are lies, and I wish to tell the truth. I left home at 8 o'clock and went to the Bath Springs for a drink of beer, then caught the bus to the Hold Hall and had a drink there. Then I went to the Walmsley at about 9 o'clock. I went to the railway, and after talking to a bloke, I came out and saw a little lad coming along the street, and I said, 'Can you give me a drink of water?' 'Yes, you can have one at my mother's,' and we walked up an entry towards the back of some houses. We went across the street and I killed him there. I stabbed him 4 times with the weapon I had. Then I walked to Frog Lane and went home. I am sorry for all the trouble I have brought on my mother and I hope she'll forgive me and forgive my father for drowning himself at North Shields. I have been wicked and deserve the worst punishment." Green later made another statement referring to the murder of Billy Hermer. "I remember the murder down Prescott Street last August because I did it. I went down the canal bank and I saw a boy and I went to try and kill him, but he screamed and ran down the canal bank. I went down Myrey Lane and went to the pub for a drink. Later, at about 9:30, I walked towards Prescott Street when a voice from some spur ground asked if I was looking for someone. It was the boy, William Hermer. I killed him with a knife, which I later threw away." At 8:10 that evening, Superintendent Lindsay announced that a 23-year-old man had been cautioned and charged with the murder of Norman Yates and would appear at Wigan Magistrates Court on the following morning. Following a number of remand hearings, Norman Green stood trial before Mr Justice Oliver at Manchester Assizes in the first week of July 1955. Despite the confession to the murder of Billy Hermer, he was tried for the single murder of Norman Yates. Although it was summertime, Green stood in the dock in a fawn shirt with a green zip pullover, light-coloured trousers, a sports coat and a mac. He was represented by Mr J.D. Robertson Crichton, QC, and pleaded not guilty. Green's defence was to be one of insanity. They learned that he was 25 years old, single, a native of Aberdeen, but for many years had lived with his widowed mother and elder brother in Wigan after spending his early school days in and around Northumberland. The family had settled in Wigan in July 1940, and finishing his education at the end of the war, Green had worked in a cotton mill when he was called up for national service. Green was classed as a Grade 2 defective due to his eyesight and opted to serve his time in the mines. In 1951 he was reassessed by the medical board and found to be Grade 3 defective with weak eyesight and a hernia. He was also thought to be emotionally unstable, nervous and had a slight stammer. He was classed as unfit for national service. Since 1951 he had been employed as a corn grinder by Charlson & Sons. They considered him to be excellent at his job, conscientious, dependable and a good timekeeper. Medical inquiries found that Green had enjoyed fairly good health and had never been treated for any serious complaints. His mother, however, insisted that for the last 2 years her son had been suffering from violent headaches, and while there was no evidence of insanity on her side of the family, she said there was on his father's. Parts of Green's statement was read out to the court in which he admitted the murder of Norman Yates. Dr Isaac Frost, consulting psychiatrist at Liverpool Hospital Board, said that during the hearing he had had 4 interviews with the prisoner and considered that at the time he stabbed Norman Yates, he was suffering from a temporal lobe epilepsy. "You are not suggesting he's mad, are you?" the judge asked. "I do, my lord. I regard him as certifiable now." Dr Frost also said that Green had told him he had been thinking about killing people since the age of 14, but had fought against it. "So, he knew that it was wrong?" asked the judge, and Dr Frost had to agree. Another medical witness told the court that an uncle of the accused was an inmate at a mental hospital in Morpeth suffering from delusional insanity. A half-brother of the accused had also shown signs of violent activity and was suffering from schizophrenia. The licensee of the Railway Inn Lower Inns gave evidence that he had seen a stranger come into the pub on Easter Monday with exceptionally light hair. "I have never seen hair so light before, but there was nothing unusual about his manner." The court then heard the closing address of both counsel, one claiming that the murderer was insane and therefore not responsible for his actions, and the other that he was a wicked killer who had murdered 2 young boys and a failed attempt to kill a third. Summing up, Mr Justice Oliver said that there was no doubt that the man in the dock had committed the murder. The question the members of the jury, of 10 men and 2 women, had to ask themselves were, did the accused know what he was doing, and supposing he knew he was killing a child, did he know what he was doing was wrong? The trial lasted 4 days, and shortly before 3 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, the 5th of July, the jury retired to consider their verdict. They returned at 6:24 and asked the judge for further direction on the issue of insanity. 15 minutes later they returned and announced they found Norman Green guilty as charged. The clerk rose to his feet. "Norman William Green, you have been convicted of the murder on the verdict of the jury. Have you anything to say why judgment of death should not be passed on you according to law?" "No, sir," Green mumbled, and as a black cap was placed on Mr Justice Oliver's head and the sentence passed, Green began to shake visibly. His mother, who had been in court throughout, clutching a Bible, also began to weep. As the sentence ended, Green had to be assisted from the dock into the cell below. There was no appeal, the defence hoping a plea to Home Secretary Gwilym Lloyd George to issue a reprieve would be successful. It was not to be. On Tuesday afternoon, the 26th of July, Hangman Albert Pierrepoint arrived in Liverpool, having carried out the execution of Frederick Cross in Birmingham that morning. We featured this case in episode 62 of Tales from the Hangman's Record. Pierrepoint met up with assistant Robert Jock Stewart at the jail, and after viewing the prisoner in exercise, sized up the prisoner and calculated the drop needed. On the following morning, at her home in Holgate, Green's mother sat quietly in the back kitchen, eyes closed in prayer, as the dreadful hour approached. About 30 onlookers, mainly women, waited outside the main gates for the execution notice to be posted. Although he was unaware of it at the time, it was the last occasion in which Pierrepoint carried out an execution. There would be 3 further hangings that summer, all carried out in August by Steve Wade. Pierrepoint would be called upon a number of times over the next few months, but all these engagements ended in reprieves before Pierrepoint tendered his resignation in February 1956. I cover this in detail in my book, Pierrepoint, A Family of Executioners, which is still available from Amazon and all good bookshops. Norman Green was undoubtedly a brutal killer, and his actions almost certainly the work of an insane man. But did he meet the criteria to be sent to Broadmoor, as Strafford had been a few years earlier? Had he committed the crimes a year or two later, it is almost certain he would not have been hanged, and like Strafford, be confined to a secure mental hospital and dying behind bars instead of at the end of the hangman's rope. You've been watching another tale from the Hangman's Record. Until the next time, thank you and goodbye.